Hello and welcome everyone. I would like first to thank the opponent for this topic. It's very challenging but also very interesting. And with this presentation I will try to go through first of all the traceability, derivative creation and intellectual property and explain what are those for people that they don't understand. By the end of this presentation I hope I will make sure to make you understand. And then I will go through generative AI, and then I will show some challenges and emerging solutions, and then I will conclude. So, Plato, in ancient Greek, talked about the theory of ideas, and then he mentioned that ideas or forms are non-physical essences of all things. In other words, the idea of a triangle, for instance, can be derived and we can make objects of that. That idea, no one owns it, but we can go back and trace an object that we have created and say that comes from that specific idea. Now, how that is translated to the world? We take those ideas and we make logos, for instance. YouTube and Google has taken this idea and has used for making their own logos, and then they own those logos. And then we can go back to this idea and say, yes, this triangle was used as a basis, so we can trace it back. However, if someone takes one's idea and combines it with another one, then we have a problem. Who owns that? Now, intellectual property, there are different, the World Intellectual Property Organization has a reference of creation of the mind, which means that we humans can create something which can be an invention, design, simple, and then we can protect ourselves by having copyright. Let's say we have a book. We can have some patents, we have some designs and we can patent it. We have logos or other trademarks, and we can have intellectual property or IP on them. Actors can perform, and they can have rights on that, databases, or other designs. There is a patent, actually, for diapers for birds. That exists in this world. Now, if we have an original work, let's say book, we can add some elements and then we can create a movie of that, which is a derivative creation of our original intellectual property, the book. Now, if we own the book, then this derivative creation, it's ours. But if we don't, then we need to ask for permission. If we go to the landscape of derivative creation and then we try to find terms around the world, we can see that the World Intellectual Property Organization says for the artistic work that alterations shall be protected as original works without bias to the original work. We have also the US Copyright Office that comes with a term of the derivative creation is a work based on derived from one or more already existing works. We have also the EU public license that says work that is based upon an original work or of any modifications can be a derivative work, but it doesn't specifically say the extent of that. Baseline. Without permission, there is an infringement, which means a violation of rights. Now let's see the last term, which is the traceability. So the World Trade Organization defines traceability as the means the ability of trace and follow. And we can see the same pattern for ISO standards and other organizations, which means traceability is the ability to trace, follow information. And we can think it in this example. We can think we have order something for eBay, and then somewhere along the time, we are here in Norway, somewhere along the time, that thing is missed. We cannot find it. So we have to go and track it and find where it is. Now I'm going to talk a little about generative AI. What it is. Generative AI is a rapidly evolving field focused on developing algorithms to generate new content. So basically here we have a data set that we aim to train on, and then we have a model that learns patterns and structures from this data set, and then finally that model can generate new content, which can be text, music, images, video, and so on. And that new content align with these learned characteristics of the original dataset. Now let's see an example of that. I'll show you a portrait here that has been created based off generative models with a specific model called generative adversarial network. And that model has been trained with 50,000 images and with portraits from 14th to 20th century. In 2018, that specific portrait was sold for $432,000. Yes, so there are different models with GANs, which, for instance, is this GAN model that I just showed you. We have diffusion models, we have general purpose transformer models, and so on. And it's important to recognize that there are many and to know their pros and cons. For instance, some models might be fast to sample, which means we can use them on mobile phones, or some of them are very heavy, so we cannot use them on mobile phones. So let's see some of them. The portrait that I showed you used this GAN model, and this GAN model is trained in the following way. We have two networks. We have the generator and the discriminator. So mainly the generator takes a noise and through some iterations aims to generate a fake image. And then the discriminator takes this fake image, let's say it's some portraits, and then the real, and try to classify that. Is it real or fake? And through those iterations, we can then generate samples. An example of that can be shown here on the left down. So this is novel data samples. We can have super resolution, which means we can go with a blurred image to a high resolution. And maybe that's also important for healthcare applications, where we can have old MRI scans, have blurred images, and we can increase the contrast there, the resolution. But also we have models that can do image-to-image translation, which means those models will be trained on some images, and then they can transfer that image to a different domain, let's say cartoon. And specifically in my PhD defense and expedition, I have used also these models to go from one domain to another. We have diffusion models, where here the model does forward diffusion, which means adds noise to the image and then tries to reverse it. And by doing that, in the end, it's possible to generate new images. Also, diffusion models have been used in music synthesis. I will just show you an example of that with some variations. So these are generated with AI. We have also large languages models like ChatGPT, and there are a variety of companies like OpenAI, Google, that has different models. We have ChatGPT that is creating text. We have DALL-E that generates images, which can have different algorithms and also applies in different fields. Now, why generative AI is important is because we can not only do automation, but we can do augmentation. we can augment our creativity, and that's very important. We can also use them for simulation generation. We can use them in healthcare. We can use them on speech synthesis, I just show you. Data augmentation and personalization. And here we can see different examples. We can see the ChatGPT, as I already said, for virtual assistant. We have Grammarly for personalized email writing. We have Jasper, automated content creation. We have Zoom, that now we can do real-time language translation. And we have Elicit, that we can summarize papers, we can extract data and synthesize some findings. We can use them in healthcare for synthetic data. We can use them for both training or testing. We can use them for drug discovery. An example here is AlphaFold from DeepMind, that they use it for protein structure prediction. Medical diagnosis, as we will see later in my PhD defense, and medical education. Overall, the growth of generative AI is exponential, and it's an important topic that we should invest some time to look to. So let's try it now. So here I took ChatGPT, and then I took the title of my trial lecture and then asked ChatGPT to make a poem of that title. So ChatGPT came back with the following. In a world where data flows so free, AI learns from you and me. It craves, it blends, it remixes with glee, but who owns the art? Well, that's a mystery. And now we can put the question to ourselves. Is that ChatGPT that owns this poem? Is it me that I created? Or is the opponents that have gave us this title? Next, I tried to create an avatar of myself. So I gave a picture of myself and say to Stable Diffusion $3, well, create an avatar of myself. And here I am. Maybe I use it, maybe not, but we can have fun with those tools, but also those tools comes with some challenges. So let's dip a bit on the challenges of those tools. Here we have Getty Images on the left, and then Getty Images has filed a case against Stable AI. And basically what they said is that they used 12 million images to train an AI model without permission. And this is an ongoing case. And you can see, this is from Stability AI, you can see the label of the original images are kind of blurred there, but it does exist. And then now we have the question, did they have permission to do that? Can they prove it? Another example is Disney company has issued a legal copyright complaint against Microsoft for the use of AI on Bing. And then basically here you can see the Pixar and Disney logo, it's on the images. So they have derived that to the created content, which is against intellectual property. Well, I couldn't really resist on trying, so I tried to ChatGPT, and through the iterations that I asked to create a Star Wars avatar of me, I managed also to add the logo over there. And then the question now is like, is that intellectual property right or not? Another example is the Times, New York Times, Swiss OpenAI and Microsoft for using their content without permission. And this is ongoing. So there are many, many different cases out there. And it's a question, does the ChatGPT that goes through all the website has permission to do that? And how we can protect ourselves, how we can do it? So in the middle, we have generative AI, and then we have traceability, where we ask the question, where did the content came from? And then we have derivative creation, where is that content new or is a copy? Later, we have intellectual property. Who owns that? So there is an interconnection between those terms, where traceability can ensure that AI-generated content can be verified and attributed correctly, and it can support derivative creation and intellectual property along the way, which means without traceability, AI-generated content becomes a legal and ethical gray area. Because if we can indeed track back to that we did have these images to train, then we can prove that we did have intellectual property on that. So now, what are the emerging solutions of that? First of all, we should ask our question, how websites, let's say we had a website, how we could protect ourselves. So how usually those ChatGPT works is that they go and use something called robots.txt that has been used for search engines before, and they scrape all over their content. Now there are studies that suggest that websites should have another TXT that's called learn.txt, and that's basically useful because you can allow only specific content to be used from the AI. And why this is important is because sometimes we might have an about page that we want our company to, or our website to be shown to the internet. But we might have some images that we don't want to be used. So now we will go and see how we can do that, how we can use pillars of provenance source to trace back information, to see how we can go from the data, the training data, all the way to the generated content and the intention of that content. So let's start with the pillars. So we have the metadata. And then here we have metadata that stores provenance information, is basically who created and how did it. We have another one was called watermarking, which is basically here we embed a hidden signal in the data after we have generated. We have fingerprinting, where we generate a unique hash that goes to the dataset, and then we can go back and trace it, even if that has been altered. Now let's go to the metadata. We have here the C2PA, which is a content provenance and authenticity standard, where someone can create a content here with the original image, the provenance information, who has created and when, and then when that person will upload that to the internet, we can put a signature, and that can be sealed cryptographically. So whenever a person does a new assertion, then adds something, then we can seal it back to that. And that is important because when we have training data, then we can see all the steps and all the changes with that. So you can see here Adobe has 2 modifications and then a third party has another one. So we can trace everything back. Now we have watermarking, which is a technique that involves embedding a signal in a piece of data, let's say text, image, video, and so on. On the left, we have Trump in a fake image here. We have the watermarking that is visible. And also we can put an invisible encrypted watermark to the image. Now we have these pillars. How do we use them? So let's start from the beginning. Let's start with our dataset. We have our dataset, how we can track it back. So how we do it is we use fingerprinting, and we can train a model that we use a unique ASCII, and then we have an encoder that encodes that to the image, and then we can have this fingerprinting to that image. Also, we have a decoder that later on can take it outside. So we have that, and now we can use that to our data set, and we can fingerprint the whole data set before training. Later on, we can train the model with this fingerprinted data set, and then eventually we can generate fingerprint content of that. And then by using the decoder from before, we can decode that and then just simply match back to the original dataset. So we can have from the content that has been created back to the original dataset. And that can ensure that the AI generated output can be traced back to the original source, which can address some on the intellectual property issues. Now we have that, but we haven't answered the question, who has created this content? So how do we do that? How we trace back who did it? So similar here, we have a unique ID for each user that is in our system, and we do a registration on that. And we have a dataset, we call it watermark dataset, that we use this user and ID. Later on, when this user uses the generative AI to create an image, we encode that unique key with an encoder to that image. Which means, if that is out there, we can just take it, use a decoder that takes back this, and we can just make a simple search in the dataset. And we can detect if that is AI generated and who did it. So the next question is, okay, we have that image, we can identify who did it, but there are many, many different models out there. Which model that person has used? Now the landscape is very big and we have images, text, and so on, but there are examples in the literature, such as the one here, whose AI that the authors are suggesting a framework for identifying here human-based text compared with AI text. And the next step that these authors did, it was to add more models there. And you can see here the blue is the human and all the rest are the rest of the models. And now someone will ask, okay, they use some of the models. Did they think what will happen if they add another one? Do they need to retrain the model? Well, for this specific research, they don't need to retrain. They can add a new model without retraining, which means the model is agnostic and scalable. Well, that's for the text, but how we could do it with images. So we can use something called latent space projection, and basically we can use, here we have the targeted images and the projected latent space, which is basically the space that the model has learned. So if we use the target images that we trained on, we can just see if the model can reproduce the same thing. And here we can see that the model matches quite on those. Later, we can test it with images that the model has not been trained on, and we can do the same. And by searching in this latent space, we can find similar images that the model can generate. But for instance, if you focus on the image on the below here, we have this guy with a horse, and then the model has not put it there. If you go back now to the logo from the case that I showed you, in that case, the logo would not be there because the model will learn how to reproduce this car and the landscape behind, but not the specific logo, if it has not been used on that. Now another question that emerges is, okay, we have from the metadata to training data, we answer who created, we found the model, but now we need to have also what was the intent of that. Because sometimes you might ask ChatGPT something and maybe it gives a good intent, but maybe there is another model that doesn't. So there are studies that goes all along the way, from the detection to attribution and the characterization, which means they can give information about the intent. Is it misinformation? Is bias? And so on. Now, another emerging solution here could be also blockchain, because it provides a secure way. When something is written, it cannot be changed. Everyone can see it, and there is no specific person owns it. However, this technology comes with some disadvantages. So you first need to understand blockchain, and doesn't mean that it prevents bias in the AI model. But we can use it as a layer for authentication. Next, we have another solutions. Google and Google DeepMind have this tool available that has two functionalities. It's called SynthID, and you can do watermark, as explained before, but also you can use it to identify AI-generated content. And we see like there is a push of finding if something is AI-generated. There's also other examples here where they try to find if the image was real or synthetic. Good. Now I want to show you, we saw some like court cases, but I want to show you some that have been closed. So here we have an artist called Christina Castanova, which has created a graphical novel which is called Zarya of the Dawn. And she used Midjourney, which is an application to create content, and then she asked for copyright protection from the US Copyright Office. And the Copyright Office said that only human-created works can be copyrighted. And then we should ask ourselves, was that AI generated and we did influence the model to create that? Do we own that? But we should also ask ourselves, is Midjourney, maybe are there any law or court cases? And yes, it is. So everything is somehow connected. However, the court said the images are not yours, are public domains, but the text is yours. Next, we have music industry VC versus AI song generators. We have Drake versus this viral song, The Wicked Rattles the Music World, on Spotify viral. And then the UMG, the Universal Music Group, filed the copyright complaint. Say basically, they used his voice and they got the song removed. Lastly, we have another case here where there is a Westlaw research service called by Thomson that has treated Ross Intelligence. So basically what happened, it was Ross Intelligence used the content of this legal search service to create their own tool. And then the court basically says that this is not a fair use. Basically, they did it this February. And that the purpose of Ross was just to build a directly competing product. So now I will conclude and give also some future suggestions. So we have a complex landscape here. We have the legal and ethical, we have policy and regulatory, we have social and cultural, we have technological, we have business related. And all of those things are interconnected with each other. It's a complex field. And there are many, many discussions through the world on that. Overall, there are blurred lines between the original and the derivative creation work. And also about intellectual property, there are legal uncertainties. However, with this presentation today, we have shown that with traceability, we can support some of those with provenance tracking, with ownership attribution, but also traceability can help with legal disputes. As I said before, if someone has indeed intellectual property on the training data, they can use to track it and prove it, yes, indeed I had. Now, what's the road ahead? Well, as we saw, we had these expanding new emerging solutions. There are many of them and probably more are coming. We have legal disputes, we have courts that we need to follow and see how those will end. We have perhaps licensing frameworks for using specific data sets, where someone can, we have it in research, for instance, we can only use datasets for research, we cannot use them to make a product. Maybe in the future, the public available datasets will be used with licensing, so someone can use it for making their own products. We have the regulatory landscape, where we have the US Copyright Office policy on generative AI, where say that the human needs to have sufficient expressive element on the creation. Just asking ChatGPT to create something is not. We have the EUA Act, which says that we need to disclose when content is generated or altered by AI. And last, we need to follow how these legal frameworks will be evolving in the future. So now, for people that are interested in more, we have the World Intellectual Property Organization, that there are ongoing conversations on the topic of generative AI, inputs and outputs worldwide. We have people say their opinion, lawyers. I will just give you one example because there are many. Back to the original portrait that I told you before, we have a lawyer from Mexico, and the lawyer said that it argues that this AI-generated output should not be licenseable for intellectual property, and says that it lacks true originality, creativity, and human intent. And we should ask ourselves, was that model actually had human intent? Was it in the creativity of the human? How was it in that model? Was it just simple training a model and creating a model? And then when we ask that question, then what about the money that was paid on that person generating this model? And what about the portraits that were used? Did they have intellectual property on those? Could they trace it back with or not? So finally, I would like to stop for a moment and say that the generative AI is a transforming creativity and ownership. While there are challenges remain, such as defining intellectual property, derivative creation, there are solutions for traceability, as we saw. But we should ask ourselves how we will define and protect creativity and intellectual property in the generative AI era. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope I gave you some inputs on this presentation, and I would like to thank you very much.